It pulls you in and doesn't let go.
Okay, hello. Welcome back to the Carousel Podcast. I am Isaac Simpson. I am here today with Librarian of Celaeno. Welcome.
Hello.
Yes, you were Rookie of the Year, according to good old Dudley of the New Right Post, not long ago. And yeah, you've been appearing on all the podcasts recently because you wrote a piece recently sort of about the state of the right, responding to the whole Alex Kashuta situation, and you've been kind of doing the circuit. You've appeared on many shows recently, which I've been listening to. You're also a great writer in your own right. You have a fabulous piece that I highly recommend called Bible Belted, which is about a guy that keeps coming up over and over again, who was this fighting preacher or whatever, named Peter Cartwright. Yep. Remind me why Peter. So this is kind of a religious thing. What was the fighting part that he ended up doing? That this is sort of all about his early story. But what was the fighting part?
So over the course of his career as a missionary, as an evangelist in the Deep South, the whole kind of premise of my article was that now in America, we tend to associate the Deep South with the Bible Belt and this very religious region. But at one point, that was not the case. It was considered a very active missionary field, and the frontiersmen out there, these hardy Scots-Irish types, were very prone to gambling and drinking and fighting and murdering each other and all kinds of other things. And so the missionaries that went out there to evangelize these people, if they were going to be effective, they had to assert show that they belonged in the culture and be taken seriously by the men there. And occasionally that meant swinging on people. And Peter Cartwright grew up in the midst of these people. He was a stout, physically large man who could hold his own in a bar fight. And when he became a missionary, that was just sort of part of his repertoire. He didn't like to fight, but if people people just show up at his camp meetings just determined to bust it up. You would think people who were just drunken rowdies would stay home and avoid things like that, but no, they had to show up with loaded horsewhips and knives and bottles of whiskey and try to screw it up, and just because they were being hateful. And so he would start beating them up. And there's a famous account from his autobiography where he had to beat up not only a bunch of drunk people who showed up to his camp meeting, but also the cops who were there who wouldn't do anything. And ended up turning into a brawl. And this was not an uncommon feature of frontier evangelization. It was understood that if you went out there, you brought your Bible, you also brought your fists, and it's part of the package.
And where was he? First of all, can you turn up your sound a little bit?
Sorry.
Can you do that on your end? You're a little quiet. I should have said that.
Is that any better?
Yes, much better.
Okay,
yes, let's stick with that. So when was this? When and where was Peter Cartwright? Because he's kind of come up. A lot of people have brought him up to me over the years.
Oh, well, so he's I believe he was born in 1785. Like a lot of people on the frontier, he was born in Virginia, and then there's this big move west after the Revolution, where everybody's going over the Appalachians to those territories right there. And so he grows up in Kentucky, much like Sam Houston, who I wrote about for Man's World magazine, made his way from Virginia down to Tennessee, same basic idea. And so he grows up there on the frontier, and his early years kind of coincide with the Second Great Awakening. It's hard to date it exactly precisely, but you're talking about, late 1810, right around that era somewhere, all the way up through the 1830s and 40s. And it's this hugely impactful period in American religious history. where you're seeing movements reach out to people who are unchurched, and also all these new religious movements develop. Probably the most significant one to come out of the Second Great Awakening was Mormonism, in terms of new religious movements, but the old line sects also were on the frontier. And so he's kind of caught up in the middle of that. He grows up and then joins the Methodist Church. But one of the points I was making in my article was that nowadays we kind of associate the Methodists with just sort of NPC tier, mainline, liberal Protestant establishment religiosity. I put some funny clips in there of some cringe stuff from the modern Methodists. But in their day, in their heyday, the Second Great Awakening, they were a powerful revolutionary force. They were guys out there preaching to the lowest in society, to the furthest away in society. They're on the frontier. It's literally sometimes just a one-man operation, one guy, one horse, one Bible, going from town to town.
We're losing you again, losing the sound here.
Oh, sorry. Very dangerous, moving from town to town, preaching. These guys generally had very little education. They tended to be people who they had just gotten converted the year before. They were enthusiastic. The Methodists tended to emphasize that enthusiasm way more than academic knowledge of the Bible. He knew the language, he knew how to evangelize, and so he was out there doing that.
Very cool. So yeah, these are the sort of the fighting preachers. You talk about the story of Peter Cartwright's conversion.
Yes.
Which is funny. I'm always confused why the word conversion is that right? Because they're not converting to Christianity, right? They're more just like finding God.
Well, in his case, I would call it a conversion. His family was his mother was more religious than his father, but from his autobiography, there's no sense that he grew up any kind of religious household or anything like that. In the doctrines that he held as a Protestant, especially coming out of that evangelical mindset, there's sort of this idea of becoming a Christian where it's this road to Damascus moment. I was going away from God, and then boom, I'm pulled towards God. And that conversion experience is very characteristically Protestant. And so he emphasizes that in his autobiography.
But hold on. Sorry. Converting from what to what, though?
From non-belief to belief.
Non-belief to belief. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So no, I'm just I hear conversion, I think converting from one religion to another. That's like what I think of, and versus converting from believer to non to believer. But yeah, it's fine. It's just a word thing. But yeah,
we tend to think as people in the American past as just sort of being generically Christian, but a lot of people, even back in the late 1700s, early 1800s, were entirely secular. They just didn't have any kind of religious beliefs to speak of.
But is that really true, though?
Oh yeah. I mean,
like that they'd never. It's one thing if you had, but at least your grandfather was Christian, right? Or are we talking about people it's not like they were like pagans.
So you have the cultural heritage, right? People that was sort of normative. If people equated Christianity with just being civilized. But in terms of accepting the doctrines of Christianity and the life associated with that. Oh no, plenty of people pass their entire lives, especially on the frontier, with only a sketchy understanding of what Christianity even entailed.
Right.
It was also, I mean, again, the culture out there is one of clannish violence, personal feuds, I kind of get into this in the article, pushing that dopamine button, the gambling, the drinking, things like that. And I kind of relate it to now. Peter Cartwright's conversion wasn't some like big dramatic thing that happened in his life. It wasn't a tragedy. He didn't commit some like horrible sin. He went to a wedding and everybody there was drinking and dancing.
Yeah, let's tee this up. So this is actually why I asked you about this. This is a great conversion story. And sorry, just you're about to tell it. Yeah, what is his conversion story?
So he just goes to this wedding and everybody's drinking and dancing as they do, and presumably it's not the most Christian event, it's basically getting married or whatever at the courthouse. He didn't really get into details of it there, but he goes home and something about the frivolity of it all, the meaninglessness of it all just got to him.
Well, he didn't. I just want to be clear. Yeah. He didn't. It's not like he was super hungover.
No,
because he actually didn't drink too much.
he was.
It
he
was,
was
the,
that
but he
wasn't his
did
vice,
dance.
yeah.
He was a dancer. He
He
liked
was
dancing.
dancing.
He loved dancing. So he was very guilty about his dancing.
Yes, it just and it's not so much the sense I got from the passage was it's not so much the dancing itself. It's just how pointless it all is. Like, this is what I'm doing with my life. None of this means anything. And I think a story like that resonates with people today. There's so many young men out there who are just, I think I used the phrase in the story, like, so society wants to entertain us to death. You know, everybody's goal is just to be as mildly amused as possible as much of the time.
And total soylenialization. Go watch the Savannah Bananas.
Yeah.
Go watch the Savannah Bananas with another 100,000 people and drink, 4 large Bud Lights and go home and whack off.
And it's not even crazy. Like, I'm getting blotto drunk. It's just everything's mild. Everything's tepid. And that's what and I think that really resonates with a lot of people. He just looked at that and he said, life's got to be more than this. And it wasn't some big, like, I killed somebody, I got to convert or so. No, it was just the pettiness of the world around him, was what convicted him of his own sin. And he turned it around in the way he knew, went to the Methodist camp meeting, Methodist camp meetings were these intense emotional experiences. I mean, the preacher's up there and I give you the Ben Franklin quote, kind of give an idea what these guys were talking about, George Whitefield out there just, banging away about hellfire and brimstone, and people are just falling out, on the floor, just in convulsions, just crying.
Jerks, right? Is this the jerks, they're called the jerks.
Yeah.
And it's like the jerks are people at these you imagine these like tent churches on the frontier, and their jerks are like this very common thing where people start jerking.
Yeah, they fall on the ground like have seizures, essentially. Is how I read it, and I talked about, some people reacted very negatively to this, like they just people, watching their sisters and mothers roll around on the ground in kind of this weird way, and they're getting amped. And Peter Cartwright had to deal with some of those people,
Right. That's not where the term jerk comes from. Is it like you're a jerk? I wonder.
I don't know the etymology. I wouldn't think so. I would imagine a jerk is somebody who just kind of like pulls you out of whatever you're doing with his inappropriateness, like you're jerked into awareness of him or something like that. Jerk
etymology. Somebody's got to figure that out. Yeah, but it's very cool that in this year at time, like this was a very common thing. It was like you had your people who drank and then you had your people who jerked, and the jerks were just flopping around all the time. And this guy who we're talking about, Peter Cartwright, was such an amazing preacher that people were jerking out all the time, and people would get pissed at him, as you said, for making their wives and daughters and stuff jerk, and they didn't like that, and they were always trying to like fight him because they were like, "You made my wife have the jerks." It's a great story. It's really like a very cool religious thing. It's also like dancing. Like dancing was bad, so you want to ban dancing, is what you're saying, right? You want to ban it.
Peter Cartwright, that's not really my path, but I don't think banning dancing is necessarily a horrible thing, or I'm sorry, dancing is necessarily a horrible thing. Peter Cartwright's coming out of a milieu where I kind of get the sense that dancing is a little bit of a euphemism. We hear about stuff back then where like, they're dancing, and I get a sense that the dancing was sort of understood to be a prelude to something else.
Twerking. It was early twerking. They were twerking on the frontier. Yeah. That's actually where it comes from.
Twerk and jerks.
The twerk and jerks. It's actually a white thing. I sort of get that feeling also about those times. It's like we think of it as chaste, but it was actually, I bet they were doing actually a lot more sex than we do today.
That was there's a quote attributed to another frontier evangelist, or somebody criticizing frontier evangelists, saying as more souls are begotten than saved at these camp meetings.
I'm sure.
you imagine the society. It's a very rural society. You've got a lot of young men, a lot of young women from different towns that rarely see each other. They're separated, and then all of a sudden here comes the revival to town, and so everybody piles in 1,000 people from all these towns. All of a sudden now you're seeing Betty Sue from the next hill over. You never saw her before, and mom and dad are busy. They're over there talking to the preacher and doing all that. And you're just kind of sneaking off into the woods, and
Yeah,
that's
right.
apparently a common
Right.
feature of these meetings too.
Yeah,
Much
and
like,
yeah. No, sorry. Go ahead.
much like you got your church lock-ins now, and everybody's there to hear the word, but also hanging out and stuff like that.
Yeah, dude. I went to, being a dirty Jew myself, raised with no religion whatsoever. I was raised equally Christian as Jewish because I had a half Christian family, so I sort of saw both of them. But I went to a church lock-in once,
Yes.
and whew, they should not have let the dirty Jew into that in there because it went pretty disgusting what went on. But yeah, no, like the whole thing was like go to the church lock-in and like
Yeah.
do bad things. Yeah, so very interesting, very cool. Yeah, so you are a teacher
Yes.
of kids or of boys of some age. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes. Although my current job is coming to an end, looking for a new one right now at the moment. But yes,
Really?
I currently teach in an all boys school. Yes. Downsizing.
Oh, so not your fault.
Not my fault.
Not,
No,
not
I'm
because
good.
you've been
Not my fault,
doxxed.
but,
Not you haven't been doxxed or something.
yeah. No.
Okay, well that's good. And you have 2 master's degrees,
Correct. Yes.
which
Political
is
science. And
insane. So what is wrong with you? Why did you get 2 master's degrees? Why are you so crazy?
I always like to challenge myself. My first master's degree. Well, no, my first master's degree I got because I wanted to teach college classes, and so they told me what I had to do. So went to school, got a master's in history, and I ended up working as an adjunct for a while, which I love.
Mm.
It doesn't pay much, but when you're single and don't have a lot of bills, it's fine. But then I get
Yeah.
married and I have bills and stuff like that. So I went back to school to be able to teach, and I worked in a charter school, and now I'm currently in a private school, which I prefer. But then, I'm teaching for a few years, and I'm sending I teach high school, I'm sending these boys off to college and stuff. And you get to thinking, could I still hack? I don't want to ask these guys to do something I can't do. Could I go to school? Could I still write papers? Am I burnt out? And so in 2023, at the age of, what was that? Age of 43, 44, I went back to school and I signed up for a political science master's degree. And I spent a year on it, and it was a great program. I was really happy to be a part of it, and got my second master's degree. And now I'm kind of looking into other things because it's just fun to stretch yourself, I guess.
Yeah, well, all right. If you're a lifetime student and you really enjoy it, so what was your specialization in each of those, in history and then in poli-sci?
In history, my main area of focus is late antiquity. So studying the period where the Roman Empire ends and what they used to call the Dark Ages begins. Nobody uses that term anymore, but that period. In particular, the 300s, the 4th century, when so many of the norms of the Christian church are established, the relations between church. My master's thesis was on Constantine, Eusebius, and Athanasius, and the post-Nicene political settlement, things like that. And then my history political science degree had to do with. Hold on one second.
It's all right. You're good. You're good.
All right, you hear me? Sorry.
Yep,
Security guy
yep.
behind me was like locking up the door while I was talking. They're not used to go. I'm actually in my classroom still from today.
Oh.
My political science degree is in international and comparative politics. Comparative politics I always thought was really interesting, looking at the differences between different systems. I'm more of a theory guy than a data guy. Math isn't really my strong suit, so that's what I kind of. But I've always been interested in political theory and political science, and the program I got into was really great. It also allows me to teach political science college classes in addition to high school. So,
Yeah. Okay. So you're on the front lines of seeing these kids developing, these young men, which I actually really enjoy hearing you talk about your experiences with them and seeing them become based which is incredible. So,
Yeah.
what kind of stuff have you seen with young men in their information digest? Are we as us dissident posters? Are we responsible for their? I know many people who would really love to take credit for that. Is it us? Is it Andrew Tate? Why are they turning based?
So it's not any one of us in particular. My students don't even have any concept that I have this other life as a
They
writer.
don't?
No, oh no,
Dude,
no,
but come on. You're not worried they're going to one day just hear your voice and be like, hey, that's Mr. Whoever.
They're not readers. They don't gravitate toward, they don't voluntarily go to Substack. I say that. I do have one former student who actually does write for Substack. I won't dox him. But I got a kid started writing here, and he's kind of slowed down a little bit because he's got some changes going on in his life right now. But got off to a pretty good start. He's a solid writer and a good kid. I predict big things for him. They filter it through the general culture. There's not one writer or anybody like that they particularly get into. What it is instead, Andrew Tate's a little bit of it, music's a little bit of it, things like that. But just in general,
music, like what music? I feel like music is the one thing we don't have.
So the music, even the music they listen to, it's like generic studio sludge rap stuff like that. They don't really have any kind of refined taste. They don't really watch much TV. It's all video games and the culture around video games. To the way right-wing ideas primarily filter to them is through conversations they have relating to the media they consume. Video games, Star Wars, things like that some of them are into, and then there'll be conversations around those things, and that's kind of where these ideas get to them.
Interesting.
Also, some of it just pops up organically simply because being young men in the world that they're in, you can't really help but feel certain ways and think certain ways. They understand the feminization of society, the feminine norms of the world they're entering.
In a very core way, right?
Yeah. And you wouldn't have to tell if you sat them down and used the word longhouse, it would all come together for them. But
they would immediately know what you're talking about. Yeah, because they get it. They see it. Yeah.
And like I'll show them, for example, and I don't ever push my politics in class. I always give them both sides of everything or all the sides of everything that I possibly can. I don't like to do that. I don't like to say, here, believe this or don't. But I'll show them a video of
I'm sure they can sense it, bro.
Yeah. I'll show them.
They definitely can sense it. They definitely, I'm sure.
I show them Greta Thunberg, and they just bust out laughing. They find it hilarious.
Right.
This is what the world tells them. You should care about this. And I don't even comment. I just put it on, and they just start laughing like hysterically, like this little girl yelling at all these grown men, "How dare you!" And they're just like falling over, like how goofy this is. Everybody's clapping for it, like this is dumb,
Dude, life finds a way, man. It makes me so happy to hear this. It just makes me like filled with joy to hear this because it's just like you can't fool everyone, man.
No.
No matter how hard you try, the young kids. This is why young kids are so great because no matter what you try to tell them, they're going to be able to tell that you're a fucking phony. Like you can fool some of the people all the time and all the people some of the time, but you can't fool everybody all the time. And young men right now are saving us. I mean, you look at these numbers. Yeah. It's like every generation is more left than right besides like 18 to 22. Yeah. And it's like if you're a left-wing propagandist or, just a normal regime propagandist, whatever, you have to look at that and just it has to kill you inside. Because you're just like, man, we had it all going. We had Obama. We were fired. We had every rapper. We had every possible thing on our side, and we fucking lost the youth. Yep. Like that's got to drive you insane.
I mean, it's the thing about kids, and this is true of young women too. I've taught co-ed before, but especially young men, is that Kids have a different relationship to lies than adults do. Adults, we live in a world where we have to constantly compromise. Lies are like the oil of the machine of society. We have to pretend all these things, and it's just the nasty part of being an adult. Kids will lie.
but
well, and I
others,
don't mean like that. I mean
others, no.
just like simple things like we okay, I'll sign this whatever thing to work and stuff.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I'll go to college
yeah.
and put up with the lecture to get my stuff like that. If you're not constantly arguing with the idiocy around you, you're making some kind of compromise. Kids don't have that inhibition though. Kids will lie to get what they want, but they hate inauthenticity.
Yeah,
They
dude,
cannot
this is
stand fakeness. It repulses them.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's
No,
like
sorry. Keep going.
the analogy I always use is with a boxer. They say you never listen to a boxer, you look at him. Guy's out there in the ring, he's getting pounded on, sits down on the stool at the end of the round, face is busted up, eyes are black, all stuff like that. You talk to him, you ask him, "You good? Can you fight?" "Yeah, I'm good. You don't listen to him, you look at him. Guy's done. You throw in the towel. Kids is the same way. They don't listen to us, they look at us. Right? And all the words that are coming out of our mouth, they can tell when it's crap and when it isn't. They can tell when we're true. Based is a great word. Based is a vocabulary term I teach them. In my government class, which is coming to an end, the last lecture I give them is illiberal political philosophies. And we go through everything that isn't liberalism. We talk about the left. We talk about elements of libertarianism. And we get to the right. And I say, here's the difference between based and cringe. Based is substantive. Cringe is performative, right? If you see somebody signaling acceptance of the system, that's what cringe is. Based is authenticity. It's the back formation of debased, when you're removing impurities and non-valuable things, all right? Becoming more real, more solid. That's what it means to be based. As we talk about that, we interrogate that concept in class. Kids like that. Anybody who wants to work with kids or expects kids to adopt their political program or their philosophy or anything like that, the best advice I can give as someone who's worked with young people for 15 years is be real. Approach them really. Show that you believe what you say you believe, and even if they make fun of you at first or ignore you at first or whatever, they'll respond to that and they will respect that.
Yeah, tell them the truth. And it's like,
Yes.
right, I think that's why people who don't like kids are always suspect, because it's like generally people who don't like kids are people who are really socially competitive, you know? And then it's like, because they know as soon as they get around kids, the kids see right through them. I think that's really true. Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. Yeah, I mean, this is obviously what Catcher in the Rye is entirely about, right? It's about this transition from, this is why people love that book, because it's like, becoming an adult is necessarily becoming a phony. Yeah. And right, it's like kids are who saves us from that. And, there's also something interesting in the fact that the reason it's particularly gutting to the regime is that the regime is, or this current way of being is obsessed with youth worship. Yeah. Like, the boomer mind. Let me just say also, boomer is one of these things that have different definitions from different people, and they'll talk concurrently and not understand what they mean. To me, boomer means hippie. Like, it means the generation of the hippies. Yeah. Worshiping music. And one of the things that boomers worship is youth. And you see that everywhere now. You see Madonna trying to be hot at age 70. Yes. It's a very boomer thing. And for the youth to turn on the boomers is just so great, because it's like it kills them inside. It makes them so upset because they're wearing sneakers and they're like, "Hey, I'm cool. I go to music shows." And it's like, no, you're not cool. You suck. The kids want to be based. They want to be based.
Much like the left loves humanity but doesn't really care much for individual humans, the boomers love youth but have nothing but contempt for young people and their actual problem.
Right. Yeah. Very true.
When I think of boomer, hippie's good. If I was going to be a little more precise, for me, David Brooks wrote a book called, what was it? Bobos in Paradise.
Bobos in Paradise. Great. I love that book, by the way.
And to me, that's the boomer mentality in a nutshell. All the libertarian, libertinism, I should say, of the hippies, but wedded to neoliberal capitalism and goodies, right? Your true hippie is someone who opts out of the system, right? He goes and lives in a caravan in the woods with a bunch of unwashed women or something like that, right?
Right.
Your bourgeois bohemian is someone who says, I like the idea of being shiftless and lazy and selfish, but I also want to work for a hedge fund and make sure that I can have a beach house where I can get high. and that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
But I
And
need
that
my
selfishness-
$5,000 bicycle. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that selfishness is what leads to a system where young people, genuine young people who actually are in their actual youth, are shut out of participating in important life
Totally.
events
Yes.
and building
Yes.
wealth and stuff by these very same people who claim to love youth.
They're the ladder pullers. The
Yeah.
baby boomers are the ultimate ladder pulling generation. They're like, okay, well, I got all this stuff, but you guys really should be less racist. So whoops. Like you're fucked.
Yeah.
I don't understand how things went so wrong. Like, how could the boomers? They're the worst generation of people in history by a huge measure. They're cancer. They're effectively when a system gets cancer. That is what the boomers are. It's when a system turns against itself. And how did that happen? Like, what happened?
So
how could it have gotten so screwed up? And why was it in America? What is the reason for why this wave just turned against everything decent and structural in life? How did this happen?
Two things. There's two things, historically speaking, that are kind of happening. And it doesn't start with the boomers, right? Everybody, when people think of boomers, they think of 1960s. And I made this point the other day, I think, in a note. The 1960s was not the radical decade. All the big important stuff happens for the most part in the 1950s.
Wow.
All the things we think of as the big changes in the 60s, that was just stuff that happened in the 50s playing out. The Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act in 1964 and 1965 are just basically the culmination of what starts with Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. The sort of upheavals in the universities, right, are this huge presence of all these people that came over the 20s and 30s who were communists, who got a foothold and had some pull by then and stuff like that. And that's kind of where that's the where all these changes start to pop up. But the big thing is the end of World War II. World War II was an epochal cultural event as much as it was a military event or a political event or anything like that. World War II shook Western civilization to its core. Western civilization experienced shell shock as a result of World War I, but especially World War II. World War II destroyed our confidence. World War II was the most educated and civilized people on earth, Germany, turning into absolute murderous monsters. That's like the story. I know it's actually way more complicated than that. But the story is that you had these people who were the most civilized, educated, the people who invented the research university. Before World War I, the most crime-free society, the most educated, every statistic you want to put. And now they're roaming the steppes, the Eurasian steppes, looking for Jews to hunt down and murder, and they're doing all these things. And so,
I mean, you say what you will, but it is fucking awesome. I mean, it's like I of course, I am not an anti-Semite in any way, and I support the Jewish people, but every Jew knows. If you read what's his name's book, Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, it's fucking awesome. Like look, I'm not saying they're correct, and then once they rose, then they did become horrible, and they became serial killers and evil, and Hitler was really bad, a really, really bad guy. But in the beginning, for the reasons you're saying, you have this amazing civilized group, and they're pushed just a little too far. And then they start this grassroots movement by a complete, total nobody. I mean, he's a nobody. Hitler's more of a nobody than maybe any leader ever. He's a true nobody, true street urchin. And he leads this revolution in a matter of a decade that is like this made up ideology, and it's completely takes over Europe. It is genuinely maybe just from an objective standpoint, the coolest story in world history. But anyway, continue. You're making great points here. I just had to say that.
I think in a lot of ways, though, so that's superficially, right? Germany's this awesome, sophisticated, educated, peaceful society, but there's a rot at the core of it.
Right.
A spiritual absence. And this is something that, from a Christian perspective, you look at and stuff, and you see people who have every kind of prosperity that humans can have, but there's this emptiness at the core of it, and that's what fuels the militarism. And one way to think about Hitler is, okay, so it's 1933, let's say, and I'm not choosing a random year. Okay, so Hitler takes power. He becomes a typical European strongman. He murders some of his rivals. He establishes a dictatorial form of government. If he stops there, most people would probably say, okay, that guy was pretty rough, but whatever. We needed a strong guy. And if it all stopped there, right, you would have had something maybe you could look back on and kind of mix things. But the impetus, it was always going to be war. Hitler talks about this in Mein Kampf. His whole goal is he believes in this biological theory that essentially this hyper Darwinism, and this was not unusual either in Germany or in America. A lot of Hitler's basic outlook would have been something that Theodore Roosevelt would have recognized. It would have been something that W.E.B. Du Bois would have recognized. This general idea that there's these different races and they're all struggling against each other for supremacy, and one race's supremacy is necessarily another race's inferiority. This basic idea was common at the turn of the century, and Hitler kind of absorbs it. But for Hitler, it was always going to be war. He was a guy who had absorbed this idea that Germany needed Lebensraum, it needed to expand east. There's a long tradition in Germany, that Drang nach Osten, that spread east. German cities in Eastern Europe were almost all inhabited by Germans. They kind of colonized the Slavic territories. And there's this long tradition of thinking of the Slavic people as necessarily inferior. So Hitler wanted to wipe out Jews. That was always the plan. And he also wanted to invade the Slavic territories and take over and enslave and eventually wipe out those people to create space through Ukraine and Russia and stuff for all the German people to expand. And the German people liked enough of that political program. They weren't down with the exterminationism, or they didn't take it seriously, or they didn't really think he would actually do it. But Germany, which had fallen flat on its face after World War I, this humiliating Treaty of Versailles and everything like that, a lot of his program looked appealing. From America, it looked appealing to people. Henry Ford was a fan. I thought Hitler's reforms were awesome. This is in the 1920s when Nazism is becoming a thing. This is when Mussolini could get play in America as a serious statesman. People were like, oh, Mussolini, he's not so bad. He made the trains run on time. That was not an uncommon thing. There's overlap between the political programs of Mussolini, Hitler, and FDR. These big government, corporate combinations, reforming the economy, the socialistic type thing. Remember, Mussolini's coming out of the Socialist Party. The Nazis are the National Socialist German Workers' Party. A lot of the Democrat Party platform in America, the New Deal, is kind of socialistic. So all this stuff's kind of in the air. What Hitler did was basically take that and just add this murderous undercurrent. And people will always debate where this comes from. Is it something primeval to Germans? Is it modern? But it's there. And it was always going to be.
Didn't it come from the Prussians? Wasn't the whole thing that it was Prussian? Isn't like the Prussians were these like very severe, great military people who had like no culture besides just like they didn't even like do anything besides war, right? Isn't that wasn't that the story?
Not exactly. So if you look at the Prussians, the Prussian aristocrats, the Junkers, the guys who traditionally dominated the German military, they hated Hitler. They thought he was gaudy. They thought he was a bombastic blowhard. He's from a different part of the German cultural sphere. He's from Austria, which is very different than Prussia. Right. Prussia is this kind of Lutheran Protestant culture, where Hitler's coming from in Austria, and then in Munich is a very Catholic culture. They're very different. The appeal Hitler made in Munich was not something that really was like appealing to the people in Prussia, that crowd. Now, Prussia does have a big part to play in that Drang nach Osten. I mean, half of Prussia today is in Poland. Prussia was founded in the Middle Ages essentially as a crusader outpost. It was a monastic state. The Teutonic Knights were given this territory by the Holy Roman Emperor to basically fight the last pagans in Europe, the Lithuanians. They launched this 200-year-long crusade against them.
Wow. Is that the Lithuanians were the last pagans in Europe?
Last pagans in Europe, yeah. They didn't convert to Christianity en masse until the mid to late 1300s. Wow. And so, and so they're there, and the Teutonic Knights are attacking them. And eventually they're successful. They convert the Lithuanians. They expand out. They later go secular. They become Lutherans. Prussia becomes a duchy and later a kingdom, and then expands out. And Prussia is eventually going to take over and dominate the rest of the German states, and that's what's going to lead to the Empire of Germany. But Germany's a very diverse place with a lot of different subcultures and regional cultures, and saying it's just Prussia would be a bit much, I think.
Well, no, I just thought that that's where the military. That's what I thought that that's where like the extreme militarism came from. Was
it's one
Prussia.
source, right? The militarism.
Yeah.
And certainly the idea that the German general staff and that emerged in the late 1800s, that was really the model for a lot of armies around the world and stuff. That comes out of a Prussian model. But like an organization like the SS, for example, is very different than that Prussian mindset. The SS recruits heavily from southern Germany. I believe most SS officers were actually Austrian. People who felt their Germanness more living in the midst of a bunch of Slavs and Magyars than people who lived in a largely German milieu.
Right.
And so that was the SS was like a culturally totally different thing, and they're the ones doing most of the exterminating.
Yeah. Wow. Fascinating. Why were we talking about this? I can't even remember why we got on.
I don't remember exactly.
Why were we talking about the Nazis? I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm trying to think now. I don't know. We got off on a Nazi tangent.
I
think we were young men. I think. What was that?
Young men? Yeah. What was it? I can't. Well, yeah. I mean, we were talking about your students being naturally based and seeing things with much more clear eyes and sort of laughing at the ridiculousness of the regime's attempts at being cool.
Yeah.
So, well, I guess let's just change topics here because neither of us can remember what we were talking about, which is, the thing that I wanted to talk about is the same thing that is being talked about on all these other things. You wrote this piece about the state of the dissident right. So why don't you just tee up a little bit what your point was and where we're kind of at right now? Because, there was the whole Alex Kashuta thing, and then, so why don't you just kind of tee up what your point was?
So there's kind of 2 points I was making. There was a kind of a particular point about that specific issue, and then a general sort of my take on what they brought up in the initial debate they were having about the general state of the right. And I'll preface this by saying, like I always do, Pedro Gonzalez is somebody who's never been anything but a friend to me. Privately, publicly, I've always thought him to be a solid guy. I disagree with his position, but it's not like a personal beef at all or anything like that. It's just a friendly critique. And we've talked behind the scenes and stuff. But in a nutshell, Gonzalez and Alex Kashuta, who I wasn't even really familiar with before this. I know other people have gone on her podcast. I had never really understood. When I heard Alex, I actually thought it was a guy. I didn't know who it was at first. I had to look it up. And then, they had this whole controversy where she's sort of saying that the online right, which from what I can gather is what she just thinks the right is. It's just this online space. And all it is basically this echo chamber and amplification chamber for MAGA. The online right says a bunch of crazy stuff. Donald Trump finds out about it. He says a bunch of crazier stuff. The MAGA people feed off this, and then it's just like this crazy loop where things keep getting worse, and it results in things like tariffs, and it's all memes, and none of it's real and substantial, and all stuff like that. And to me, that's a very impoverished look at what the right is. I don't even think it's especially accurate in terms of the right's relationship with MAGA, which is much more nuanced and complicated and critical than sort of the kind of caricature I would say she's painting, where people on the right, I mean, if you're talking about the right, you're talking about people who love MAGA, people who hate MAGA, people who think MAGA is controlled by Jews, people who think MAGA is, people who black pill every time Donald Trump doesn't immediately put, AOC in jail, people who, I mean, you see this huge range of opinions from people on the right about MAGA and what MAGA means. And that's a debate we're going to be having on the right long after Trump is gone is what did this mean? What did it signify, right? What's the historiography of MAGA? So to just paint that portrait of MAGA, I thought was unfair. And also it reduced a lot of really hard work that a lot of people are doing. Good people. She criticized raw egg nationalists very heavily. I love raw egg nationalists. He's called me a friend. I like the guy. I think he's a great writer. And I think he does a lot of really interesting things, pushing the envelope on what used to be lefty issues. The left used to be all about health food and stuff like that. And, taking that and taking ownership of that for the right is great. You've got people publishing books. You've got Arctos, you've got Passage Press, you've got Antelope Hill, you've got all these people bringing back these right-wing authors. To say that like there's this vibe and it's went downhill and it's all just self-referential memes. No, not at all. The right is, I don't even like the term dissident right. I use it because it's a term of convenience. People understand what you mean. But I like ascendant right. That's the term I prefer to use. There's no going back. There's no retreating. There's no election that's going to happen where this genie gets stuffed back in the bottle. That's the white pill I like to hand out to people.
Yeah. Okay, so you're sort of, to me, it's just so obviously a push, right? This is so obvious. First of all, the piece with Kashuda, what I'm seeing that is happening is we're seeing the media trying to deal with the dissident right.
Yes.
The funny thing is, I don't really think we're a threat. Like, we're not a threat. They think we're a threat because of J.D. Vance.
Yes.
And they hear the way that J.D. Vance talks, and they think that we're controlling things that we're not controlling. What I see, the one thing that I'll say that I think we have done a great job of, and this is what you see with this new administration, is Administration 1 came in and tried to play ball with the Yarvinian concept of the outer party.
Yeah.
And, that was before anybody had read Yarvin. It was before anybody had read, Nick Land or had gotten into this discussion of power. I think you said this recently. It's basically like the difference with this new thing is that this new right is that they are willing to and interested in understanding power.
Yes.
And understanding the machinations of power behind the scenes and being willing to implement them. For me, this really came to a head as a propaganda person myself and somebody who's interested in publicity and signs and ads. There was a moment where I can't even remember if I think this was even before the election, but I can't totally remember, where Trump and Vance and maybe somebody else were at a football game. Mm-hmm. And there was a shot of Trump and Vance and somebody else and on the Jumbotron, and next to the faces of them on the Jumbotron was a giant Palantir ad. And that's when I was like, okay, we got this. They figured out how to do this, because that's what the left has been doing forever. They have, it's all conglomerated. They got they got a whole system. This is bog beef. Well, arguably this all comes from bog beef, which is, we have this patronage system. Yeah. And what I think, basically the power of the dissident right lies in, our ability to have red-pilled people like J.D. Vance into understanding these power networks. And I think that you've seen that. I think that you have seen that in the way that this new administration has behaved, at least in some ways.
Yeah, I would definitely agree.
Yeah.
You're talking about people who understand. Trump is not right-wing. Trump will always be a boomer con. It's just his nature. He's almost 80. There's no, that's just how he sees the world. But he understands, maybe just on an intuitive level, who his friends are and who his enemies are. And he knows there are people he cannot make deals with that just have to go. And that includes the Republican Party. This time around, he's not trusting, these guys just because they're generals. He's not trusting these guys because they've been around. They smile at him. That's kind of stuff like that. He's not doing that anymore. He's brought his own team in, and Donald Trump did what a boomer almost never does. He finds a young guy. I mean, JD Vance is younger than me. He brought this guy in, and you look at all the young people in his administration. It's not this gerontocracy that it was before. These are guys in their 40s, 50s, maybe. He's got a deep bench that he's developing, and the guys he's developing are not boomer cons. JD Vance is the cutting edge of this. I'm impressed by Marco Rubio's, heel turn. Marco Rubio's come out and become pretty much like a freaking integralist almost. He's going down to El Salvador and high-fiving Bukele and like, hey, how many people can we lock up down here? That's not
that was Rubio jumping in. I mean, Rubio jumped into this new coalition that had been made, right? Yeah.
Which is I like. A lot of people are like, oh, he's just he's just a plant. He's just doing this for. You got to welcome converts at some point.
Totally, absolutely. And it was probably in him the whole time. Like he probably knew this the whole time and was just like, hey, finally, people who get it.
Yeah, and good for and these guys are young and they're paying attention to people who, and that's like the crazy bug out moment for me is like there's people that I converse with who know the vice president. There's people who I email with and who comment on my work and stuff, and they have this whole other life, knowing these powerful. It's weird just having that. I mean, I'm nowhere near proximate to power myself, but just being like 2-3 steps away is like funny. Like I know people who know Yarvin, and Yarvin knows this guy. Like, whoa, okay.
This whole thing makes me. I hate this. What makes me so sick to my stomach. Not what you're saying, but I just this whole thing of make some posts online, and you too will influence the administration. Like that whole thing. It's just
that's the wrong way to approach it.
It just makes me sick, It just makes me talk about phony. It's just like, oh my God. And it's like, what are they selling? It's like the people who say that are trying to sell you something. They're trying to sell you, get on board with our thing. It's also just not true. Like, I don't think that. What I love, again, is that the dissident right has impacted strategy. And you got to give that to Yarvin. You got to give that to Yarvin. You got to give it to posters because they've understood. People like Orrin McIntyre, they have transmuted these ideas, which is, it's funny because it's this kind of like nerdy. They had to like end around. Like the left never... Sure, you could say Rufo's book, which says, they've been plotting this since March Through the Institutions. Like, yeah, okay, sure. And Alinsky, like, yeah, okay, I guess you could say that they intellectualized it. But the right came at it from this very, like late sort of like nerdy, like, if we think about this hard enough, we can convince ourselves to like do things for power. Like, right? And I sympathize with that. I sympathize with being, kind of a Dostoevsky idiot type of like thinking that everybody else is doing it for the right reasons and nobody is, right? And I think that that's kind of what the right is. It's like, okay, we can't go on this way anymore because we're just going to get steamrolled forever. And that's where our movement has done a very good job. But we are not the reason Trump is in there. At all. We have nothing to do with it. We have almost nothing to do with it. I mean,
we
like, no offense.
An influence, not the influence.
Yeah, it's like it has nothing to do with us. MAGA has nothing to do with the intelligent right, this new E-right. It's completely... The latter adopted Trump. Trump did not... He has nothing to do with the dissident right. Yarvin's not even a Trump supporter.
Yeah,
come on.
I wouldn't say nothing. There are some points of overlap that I think are important.
Sure, they're not. Of course. Yeah, I'm being hyperbolic. Definitely.
Well, what I mean is, you're correct in that there's not a ton of ideological overlap, right? Donald Trump is not a rightist. He's not, reading Nick Land or whatever like that. No. But there's a sort of emotional, energetic overlap, where there's these people online who are not numerically a large number of people, but they have this kind of energy where the the MAGA energy and the right wing energy kind of coincide on a few very important points. Things like immigration, things like the international right, where you would not see, I think, in the last Trump administration, Donald Trump coming out and saying, the AFD deserves a shot. Don't put this guy in Romania in prison. I don't think he would have seen that before. He would have been on kind of the side of just normie liberaldom. That comes from the right, right? And the idea that MAGA is connected to this international rightist movement does not come from MAGA, but that's where the right comes in, where we're sort of binding all these things together. It wouldn't have occurred to Donald Trump that MAGA and the AFD and all these other movements all over Europe and stuff like that are all kind of bound up together. That's what the right is doing. It's taking that MAGA energy and binding it to all these other currents and putting it together, not necessarily into a coherent political program, but a coherent, for lack of a better word, spiritual program, energetic program. Everybody knows that liberalism, or everybody on our side anyway, I'll say senses that liberalism is kind of on its way out, that it can't keep going in its current form. My boys sense that, even though they don't have the vocabulary for it and couldn't articulate it in those terms. Everybody knows things as they exist now are not going to keep going forever. MAGA is this kind of bridge. MAGA is this old boomer con energy, the people that still remember in America before all the changes the boomers made. That's the thing about boomers that makes them different than everybody else is they grew up in a world where boomers weren't the norm. So they grew up in a world where Christianity was culturally normative, where people still understood the classics and myth. If you look at the movies that boomers made, they're informed by sensibilities that their children don't have, and their grandchildren don't have, and their great-grandchildren don't have. They're disconnected from that traditional world that the boomers grew up in. Boomers, in that sense, are the last trads. They rejected it, but they're the last ones formed by it. And that's the bridge now to a new world where traditionalism has to be rediscovered. MAGA's the spark, right? We're the flame, and all the people out there are the tinder, and we're going around spreading matches everywhere, getting everybody ignited.
Yeah, sure-ish. I mean, it's like
I get the hesitancy because it's not something you can point to and say specifically here, specifically there, it's happening, right? It's much more, I would say, subtle. I think, and I'll make a prediction here live, it'll be more clear within like the next 4 or 5 years, all these connections. I mean, they're not now, I'll give you that, but I think they will be.
I think that, like, where I totally agree with and like the dissident right is in their elite theory stuff. They're right about all this. They're right about getting into the institutions. They're right about flipping Harvard. That type of stuff is true. And I think that those initiatives can be good. And I think that they can be powerful, and they will lead to later trickle down stuff and all that kind of thing. And so I'm completely like down and interested in that. I don't really want to participate in it. I'm a populist personally. I don't want to get involved in elite shit. I don't have any interest in changing Harvard from this to this. All that is just like boring to me, and I'm not. It's just I don't really care. I'm also a culture person. But I also think that, we should flip Hollywood. We need to forcefully take over these institutions. And I think that at a core level, the dissident right really does get that. And they know like how important these things are and how they really do need to be flipped. I think the thing that what I'm noticing is you have this piece in one of your pieces, recent ones, where you're saying the left is being quiescent. I like this word, quiescent. Yeah. I've literally never even heard that word before. I don't even know what that means.
In other words, passive.
Quiescent.
Yes.
You say the left is being quiescent because it's actually good if Rufo clears out Harvard.
Yeah.
It's actually good if Claudine is gay, If Claudine Gay is gone, and now we have Zionist McGee in there. That's actually, like slightly still a total leftist, but happens to be Zionist, right?
Yeah.
Like that's actually good. That's what the left wants because the left needs somebody to do that.
If the left, I mean, you're talking about, upwardly mobile laptop job, urban types and stuff like that. Nobody gets more hamstrung by this sclerotic, boomer, DEI, bloated bureaucracy that's in their way. They got nowhere to go. Right. They don't like MAGA. They don't like the right, anything like that. But just in economic terms, all this diversity crap is bad for them, right? It blocks them from access to power like they think they should have. And so Donald Trump coming in and clearing out all the dead wood, as far as they're concerned, that kills two birds with one stone. First, it lets them signal and be cringe and just, "Ew, Donald Trump's so bad. It's awful. I can't believe he's deporting this guy who has the job I want. Oh, I can't believe he's getting rid of this protester who, once he's fired, I can move into his spot." And, like that, like that's basically the tone. Once the dust is settled and the spaces are cleared and the opportunities are there, you're going to see these guys start to try to filter back in. My whole thing about elite spaces, I don't think there's anything on the right now that needs more interrogation than that idea of elite. Because you got a lot of people running around using that word to mean, IQ score or something like that. And then you look at these guys and they look like somebody, one of my teenage students could beat up. And that's not elite. It just isn't. I don't care how smart you are. If a child can beat you up,
you're referring to elite human capital, right?
Those guys, right? You're not. I mean, elite is a much more I hate to use that holistic word because it's freaking DI word, but it's a much more holistic concept than just how smart you are, what credentials you have, anything like that. In a time of conflict, if you look at history and stuff, the elite institutions of the day. They'll supply some people and stuff, but in any big turmoil, in any big period of change, you see somebody come out of nowhere, places that nobody thought elites could come from. You look at the Civil War, you had Harvard back then, you had Yale back then. What was their impact on everything, right? The guys who were running things they started off, all these West Point types and everything like that. The guy who ends up in charge of the Union Army, he was at West Point, but he failed out of the Army for being an alcoholic. He was selling firewood, at Ulysses S. Grant, on a street corner for 50 cents a bundle in 1860. 1868, he's the president of the United States. Yale didn't do that. Harvard didn't do that. The institutions of war did that. Conflict did that. He was elite the whole time. It just took an upheaval for that eliteness to manifest itself. And that's what's going to happen now. Harvard's great, Yale's great. They got a lot of great scholars. They do a lot of great things, not slighting the people. But that's not where the future is going to come from. There's going to be conflict and people are going to emerge out of that chaos. And that's going to be the elite. Getting control of Harvard, getting control in Hollywood. What's Hollywood? They film more movies in Georgia at this point, than they're even doing out there.
This is a big thing.
You're talking about Hollywood's got a lot of pull still. If you look at the stats, they still got a lot of money and all this stuff like that. But that's not where the trend is. Young people have a chance to get ahead of all this stuff. Young people, the young guys I have in my classes, you can get a fine education if you know what you're doing. With all the reshoring and everything like that, you can build a new economic status around production and being an electrical engineer and learning supply chain management and all this stuff like that. Those laptop jobs that everybody depends on, that urban elite stuff, AI is getting rid of that. That's the tendency I see. And that's why I think all these progressives are ultimately going to be frustrated after reforms of Donald Trump, because they're not going to be handed power. They're going to walk into Harvard and it's a whitened sepulcher. It's not producing the elites anymore. The elites are going to be dominated by what I'm predicting. And again, I'm not a psychic, but there's going to be this new kind of industrial elite that comes out of these tariff reforms, this reindustrialization. It's not going to be the man. It's going to be like a new Andrew Carnegie, coming out of nowhere, learning these processes, a young man moving forward. That's a future that I see. I'm not saying it's the future, but it's a future.
Dude, I'm totally pulling for that. And I kind of see the same thing. I sort of, the one, I will say the best thing I've seen in anything on the right since getting deeply involved in this is El Segundo. And El Segundo is this young group of guys who have defected from Silicon Valley. They're all they're all the type of person who, and I know because I am one of these people, they cannot abide the longhouse. They would show up in one of these female-dominated environments, and they would become a target on day one.
Yeah.
Because they just don't have this ability to play this game that you have to play. You know, most guys aren't like this, but about 20% of guys, they just can't do it. They can't bring themselves to play this thing where when you have women managers where you're supposed to just let them say whatever, and you correct them. Right. And they can't take that. They cannot take being corrected. So then you become a target, and then these guys have no chance. These are some of the smartest people. They're the most dedicated. They're the most, interesting, and they have the craziest idea or the most interesting ideas. But because of their personality profile, which isn't bad, I mean, we call them autists, but they're not autists. They're just a certain type of guy. And this type of guy has always existed. And it used to be that type of guy had a chance. Yeah. He could go into the workplace, and you know what? He could lose his temper a couple times, but his male managers, they don't fucking care. They say, shut the fuck up. You know, I don't want to hear about your tantrum. Go to work. Fuck you. Now, that guy, if he loses his temper one time, which is what young men do. You're 26. You're meant to be killing people. If you lose your temper one fucking time at work, you're done. I mean, they won't fire you, but you'll be on a PIP. You'll be forever chronically, they'll never let you get ahead. And that type of person, those young men have realized this, and they have just left. They've left Silicon Valley, and the one place I've seen them truly gather in an authentic way is El Segundo, which this is Palantir, it's Anduril. Actually, neither of those companies are actually in El Segundo, but those are kind of the spiritual leaders of this scene. And it's guys doing defense companies. They call it hard tech. Yeah. And it's real. Like, you go to El Segundo, this is real. This isn't, vibes. Like, there is really 500 young men, maybe way more now, getting huge amounts of funding in Silicon Valley to build these companies that aren't racist, they're not sexist, but they're just not about doing this identity Marxist bullshit that the Silicon Valley has become. Like, they're just dedicated to making cool shit. And they're all led by these young men who really would have no chance in the, feminized workplace that is required almost everywhere else. And so that leads me to believe that you're right, that really we're shifting to this industrial elite. And I really hope you're right.
It kind of reminds me a very prescient work, Ernst Junger's The Worker, where he talks about the worker being this archetype for the future, sort of like the warrior of the future is the worker. And I think he was off a little bit, right? Because he talked about the worker as being this sort of you're almost like your identity is dissolved in your identity of the worker in this emerging industrial society. And again, he's talking about the early 1900s. But I think now you have this, with technology and the way things are reorganizing, this chance to be a real autonomous worker, to use these industrial processes to craft your own vision, to be much more independent than you could before. It's a real interesting change. Where I'd like to see this, I mean, I get this is playing out in Silicon Valley and stuff. It has yet to play itself out in education, and that's a shame.
Yeah. Well, University of Austin.
They're trying, but I mean, even still, right? It's still like, it's kind of like we're trying to make a right-wing longhouse, right? We're trying to make a right-wing version of this model as it exists.
To explain what you mean by that. That's actually an interesting point. Why is that the right-wing longhouse?
So here's what happens with these things, right? They're like, okay, you got, Harvard, whatever, and they've gone all progressive and stuff. So we're going to basically create a school that's going to organize the same way with the same basic ethos, everything like that. We're going to make a right-wing version of it. But it's the structures that lend themselves to this longhouse thing. Case in point, kind of what happened to me today. I had a job interview today. I'm talking to this lady who's in charge of a school, and it's a classical school, right? It's where I kind of want to teach. And classical can mean a million different things. You got to kind of suss these people out, what they mean and stuff. And she's describing the job, and it sounds great. It sounds really awesome. And then she gets into like specifics of it, and she says, Now here we have a coaching model. And I said, what's that?
Oh my
Says, well,
God. Here we go.
One of our coaches comes to your class and monitors you, and then they give you all these tips about the technique.
Oh no!
Yeah,
oh my
and
God!
I just right away, I'm like, everything about this. Like, that's what I mean. It's just they like I've been teaching 15 years. I don't need notes. Okay, if I'm doing something really seriously wrong, and anybody can get advice, right? But I don't want somebody. Well, now here's what you should do. Talk for 12 minutes instead of 15 because study should.
Yeah.
It's,
oh my
it's so
God!
bad. Like, and that's what you're dealing with. People just want they classical in a lot of places. I call it what do you call it? Pleated skirt LARPing. Like they think the problem with schools is that it should be like it was in the 1950s, as if that's not where the problem started. So as long as we're writing in cursive, we're wearing pleated skirts, we're diagramming sentences. That's classical, right? Everything else, there's no, and that's what we really need. We need that energy, that El Segundo energy in education.
Yeah, which is kind of like, you're right. It's like, it's almost just like leaving the whole school behind. It's like, don't even try to, right. Yeah, no, it's right. The dude, I tweeted this the other day, and it's the longhouse problem's worse on the right than it is on the left, because the left is now conscious of it, right? Yeah. Whereas the right, now you have these people who they're like, I'm a right-wing feminist. It's like Megyn Kelly. It's like she's like, she is in no way right-wing. She's reactionary, against the excesses of the left, which is fine. Yeah. And it's like, at least she's that. It's better than being the opposite. But she's in no way, her model of the world is in no way right-wing. No. It's the same thing now. It's just she's in charge versus another woman. Like, that's the only difference.
It's like Nancy Mace. I can't believe a man is in a woman's space. Your whole career is you being a woman in a man's space.
Yeah.
Exactly, that's your whole claim to fame.
Yeah, she's just hanging on. She's like, oh, well, here's a space for me to. Right, they're the ladder pullers on the other way. Yeah. Yeah, well, and so I think that kind of brings us full circle to this question of what is this new right now, and what does it actually mean? And I think that it's like, right, there's a whole part of this thing that I've seen that they want to become the new outer party. Yeah. Right? That's what they want to be. And they're perfectly happy to do it, because the outer party gets rewarded really well, right? Yeah. Like the outer party gets lots of stuff. They get lots of goodies. Like if you come in and you come up and you're like, oh, well, we're the reactionary, right? We're here to say, no, you shouldn't do that. That's too far. That's too far. Oh, we're going to clear out, we're going to doge all this stuff so that there's no more employees. Which, again, I'm completely for, by the way. Yeah. I'm not saying I'm against this. I'm just saying, unless that stays as policy, unless Doge becomes the policy of the land, where you're no longer hiring a fucking, 17 women to coach you, on your teaching. Yeah. Unless that's the law of the land, and we get rid of the Civil Rights Act, which we absolutely need to. Oh, yeah. If we want to continue to be America in any semblance of a real way, then we did their work for them. We just did janitor. All we did was become janitor, and then, okay, thanks for janitoring. We're back in control now in 4 years, and you janitored some people out of the way, and you know what? We'll give a couple of you guys some jobs, sort of vaguely as the right-wing person saying the right thing. But we're back in the driver's seat, and have a good one. Yeah,
that's so. To that end, I think there's 3 dimensions that the right is going to be operating on, and for it to be successful, it has to be operating in all 3 and be successful in all 3. There's the political dimension, which is going to involve people who are earnest, but it's also going to involve some people who are grifters and coattail riders, and who are just bringing that kind of selfish energy, but they are getting things done. People who are good at shouting out their own brand. People like that. That's the political dimension of it. People who are going to get access to power and be in power or influence power in order to get right-wing ideas advanced. Next to that, you're going to have the intellectual dimension. You're going to have people who are writing books and developing ideas who get to stay back a layer from politics and don't have to grift and stuff like that, who are able to be a little more ideologically pure and come up with the concepts they're going to filter their way into politics. And then there's a spiritual side of it. There's something that we all have to find in ourselves, where we look at the compromises we as individuals and collectively are making with liberalism, and as much as we can purge that from ourselves, right? There's a sense in which, we want these reforms, but we try to find comfort in what is. And we have to reconcile ourselves to the fact that there need to be some really radical changes that are going to upset our sense of what's normal, to the point that the world we are building is going to be a world in a lot of ways we don't recognize. And we have to be comfortable with that. We didn't grow up in a world where right wing was normative. When I hear these young guys, when I hear these young guys, dropping casual racial slurs to each other and to different races, like joking with each other, I wince a little bit because I've been conditioned to just respond to that. No, don't say, this one Mexican kid calling another Mexican kid, whatever, like, I'm not gonna say it online, I don't get in trouble, but, but saying one of those things, and I wince a little bit, but they don't care. It doesn't mean anything to them. And I got to get used to being in their world because they're the future.
Yeah, it's right. So like, what does it look like? Like what does it look like actually? Because I don't think it looks anything like what we're so not used to it, right? It's like we're so not used to what an actual change would look like. And again, it's like El Segundo is really the only place that I've seen it. Really, it's like none of these things in New York or even in LA where we do. These aren't right wing events. They're anti woke, right? They're kind of like, but they're actually liberal, right? It's like actually what we're doing is just reclaiming liberalism and saying, hey, we get to say whatever we want, right? Yeah. It's like that's not really what being right wing means. Being right wing would be peeling back time to before the baby boomers put all these horrible ideas in our heads to where where tradition is good. Like, right? How do we get that back?
I get that, right? I get that impulse. And a lot of people, there's a whole book called The Shipwrecked Mind, where this guy advances this thesis of the right wants to go back. I never liked that framing. I don't think of the right as the past. I think of the right as transcendent. I'm not looking backwards. I'm looking up.
Sure.
And even just calling it the right only takes on historic. It's not the right. It's the normal. It's only the right because the left came into existence, because liberalism came into existence during the Enlightenment and stuff. Before that, my ideas were just like Evola says, what every right-thinking person believed on Earth. Whether you're in Confucian China or Hindu India or anywhere else, the Ottoman Empire. Everybody, a gentleman was a gentleman pretty much around the world. Same basic ideas. That's what I want to give. For me, the return to the right is return to normalcy, and it will happen. I don't know the exact shape it'll take, but it will be a cascade of people just doing things. Right now, Donald Trump's big obstacle, he's got all these reforms that he's putting in. They're passing. He's doing executive orders. Congress is with him, and it's getting stopped by the courts, by this barrier that liberalism has erected to prevent real change. And one of two things will happen. Liberalism will defeat him. He'll acquiesce to the courts, or he will just do things. And if he just does things, if he just says, you know what, this is the past, I'm the future, and this is what's happening. If he just does things, so will everybody else. El Segundo is because a bunch of people got together and said, let's just make a company. Let's not even deal with it. Right.
Yeah.
There'll be 1 million El Segundos. There'll be El Segundos in schools, right? People will say, you can't kick this kid out. He has ADHD. No, we're just doing it. Stop us. You can't deport this guy. Stop us.
Well, that's certainly what they do.
Yeah. And that's what
they certainly just do whatever they want. They break the Civil Rights Act openly,
and that's
constantly.
The point.
Right? They don't care about it at all. They will, huge organizations. I've seen this recently. I'm not going to say anything specific, but huge multi-billion-dollar organizations will, in today's world, send recruitment emails that say no white people.
Yeah.
That is just totally illegal.
Yeah.
but they do it anyway.
Yeah.
Like there's like, we don't care. We just do exactly. We just do things. And that's kind of what the right has realized. I mean, you're talking basically about this Rubicon moment that we're kind of coming up to, which is what's going to happen with the courts. Is Trump going to disobey the courts? So what do you think is going to happen with that?
I can't predict. I will say that Donald Trump has nothing to lose. He's almost 80, and they've tried to kill him twice that I know of. They've tried to put him in jail. They've tried to bankrupt him, and they failed. And they literally have no leverage against him. They came and put him in jail at this point. He's immune. And to the degree he realizes that, I think you'll see him stepping up and defying the Supreme Court and defying any courts. What I'm curious about is who's going to stop him. I mean, one of the cleverest things he did, the smartest thing he did, was go in and get Elon Musk to just cut off all these slush funds, all these protest NGO funds and everything like that. They buried USAID. They found out where all the money was flowing. That's why you're not seeing all these, they can't mobilize their street mobs like they used to.
I think that's also October 7th is the real reason for that. But anyway, sorry, keep going.
And there's that too. And it's, you're talking about a situation where what's he going to do? Is he going to blink? I don't see what's going to make him blink. Might he blink? Sure.
Yeah, but as you said before, he's not that. I just don't like Vance for sure. Like, because Vance gets it. Vance, again, Vance has been reading Yarvin, so he understands. And, he reads people like you who cover this stuff. Yeah, he probably does. Who cover this stuff and who know the history and know the paces and like kind of like how this stuff works. And, there's going to be a point in which we're going to have to say, we're not listening to you anymore. I don't really see Trump as that guy. He doesn't seem, as you said, like he doesn't think about things that way. I don't think that he thinks about things as like this need to, he's personally vindictive, right? Like he's a personally vindictive person, which I think is good in his case. But I don't see him as somebody who's going to blow up the system in that way, really. I think once Vance comes around, and I think Vance will definitely be president at some point, then we'll get this kind of thing, right?
I look at all the forces acting on him, though. There's no Mike Pence this time.
Yeah,
there's nobody telling him to pump the brakes.
Sure, in that sense, maybe where it'll be sort of an act of omission. It'll just be like him not going back on it, right?
Yeah,
and the people around him can carry it forward. I could see that. Yeah,
and JD Vance, understands. I think that there's no Vance 28 unless there's a Trump 24. Unless this is successful. His future in politics is bound up with Trump. I think Marco Rubio understands that. I think all these, even Donald Trump's enemies, even people like rivals like Ron DeSantis understand this, that if this doesn't work on some level, if the left comes back in, it's going to be a purge. It's going to be people banned from social media, banned from TV, debanked, deplatformed, everything. The level of revenge is going to be unspeakable, and they've all, the Rubicon moment. I mean, it's here. It was here when Donald Trump got back up after he got shot, and said, "Fight, fight, fight." That was the real moment. I think when things changed. Now again, I could be totally wrong about this. I don't know the man. I don't know what's going on. I don't think he's the same guy for 2016. I think the life altering events that he went through, the getting put in prison and stuff like that. I don't think he has any. If anything could shake his boomer faith in the system, it's what he went through.
Yeah. Wait, is it faith in the system or is it simply ignorance of it? I think it's more he just doesn't know these things. I think he doesn't. I just think it's more that like he is not. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. No,
so 2016 Donald Trump. The 2016 Donald Trump is talking to the New York Times. 2016 Donald Trump is talking to Don Lemon on CNN. as much as he critiques these people, he was critiquing it from within the system. His basic idea is, as far as I could tell, is a coherent program is, things were great in the 1990s. We should do that again, that kind of thing. And now I think it's different. You don't see him doing those things anymore. He has a much more adversarial relationship, not just to Democrats or people like that, but to the whole system. He's gone outside the traditional Republican Party. He's got RFK. He's got this whole crew of people around him who are this eclectic mix of people who just all are united in wanting to just wreck the system in some kind of way. And you don't surround yourself with people like that if you're not in some way on board with it.
Sure, but it's a coalition. Like this is his necessary coalition. And the thing that he was incredibly smart about, whether it was him or other people realizing it, was he knew that last time he knew that he absolutely could not do the same coalition as before. So he formed this new coalition of people who were much more serious. And I think that coalition can cross the Rubicon. And, I think that hopefully they do. I just don't know if it's going to happen this time around. I think it's like we're leading up to that. It's also, I don't know what's going to happen to the left at all. I mean, do you have any sense of what they're going to do? Because I really have no ability. I could see Hillary running, like for sure. I could totally see that. Like, what are they going to do, man? Like, who are they going to, they have nobody. Like, what are they going to run out? AOC? Of course not.
Yeah. It's not so much the left that's the big problem. The left is mentally ill, and it's warehoused in places where they can't do the neoliberal system any real damage, colleges and stuff like that, where they can run their mouths, and the serious business of cultural libertinism and global finance can just kind of keep going as it was. That's the real problem. And to me, my guess is they'd try to run some kind of Mark Carney, faceless global homo bureaucrat, as their guy. Gavin Newsom would be perfect for this. He's good at that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's probably what it'll be.
And probably something like that. But I don't think it'll work. I think that if Donald Trump's economic reforms are put in place and he's serious about them, the blow that's going to strike to that neoliberal globalism, which isn't going to last. It's basically a system run on free money. He loaned money out to the banks. There's that Cantillon effect where they spend it before inflation hits and they're getting the most money. And that can't keep going forever. If anything, the war in Ukraine has shown that people can live without dollars, and that's a terrible lesson for us that the world learned. That you can wage a major war without access to that dollar system. And that's proven to be the case. A successful.
Well, and now these wars are just adding up. Especially, I mean, like to me, it seems clear that World War III is coming, because we have now three. Yeah. Where once there was one, there is now three. Yeah. And so, I mean, the Israel thing will probably be over pretty soon. But if there's three wars going on, that's like pretty unstable. Yeah.
I hope not. And I don't think I think there'll be a lot more. I don't know if a general war will break out. I think there'll be regional wars.
Yeah.
I think that people kind of, and I think everybody understands that. I think America, the Biden administration even understood this. Donald Trump wasn't the first to advocate reshoring. If there's one thing COVID taught smart people in general on all across the political spectrum, it's that we can't keep going. These efficiencies are good for profit, but they introduce enormous vulnerabilities. When a hurricane hits Puerto Rico and the world has no saline bags, that's bad.
Yes,
it's making somebody money, but it's not good for everybody else.
Well, and imagine once war hits, once war hits, it's going to be insane, I mean, that's why it's like this tariff thing is good, because it's like, this has to be dealt with at some point.
Reshoring is a strategic imperative as
right.
much as it's an economic one.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
to me, that's the back that Donald Trump needs to break. That sort of globalist banker elite, managerialism, right? That's what has to go. But the left is a problem, but that's the bigger issue.
Yeah, it's so hard for me to predict. I can understand what's going to happen to the right. I think I have a clear sense, but what's going to happen to the left? I have no idea. It's like I can't. how are they going to evolve? They've put themselves in an impossible situation. And I don't see how they get out of it. Like what can they do? Like
the best
they
move they
can't-
could make, the best move they could make is to be 2016 Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders came out and if you look at early Bernie Sanders, not what he evolved into over the course of like a year, but early Bernie Sanders was out there saying the American workers being screwed over, mass immigration is a Koch brothers plot. It's a capitalist plot against the workers. We don't need mass immigration. We need strong borders. All this stuff about crime is too high and stuff like that. He was an economic populist who was pro-immigration restriction, pro-American.
I was a Trump supporter also, but I supported him for those reasons.
That's a great appeal. That's an appeal that could work.
But people are too dumb. They're too dumb.
It's why the neoliberal wing of the Democrat Party shut it down.
Right. Because it was like, no, they were like, no, there's no way you're actually cutting into our balance sheets there, Bernie. Like, this is all fun until it actually matters.
If you had somebody come out who was, the guy says, listen, I'm a serious Catholic, and I believe in Catholic social teaching, especially economic teaching. I believe every working man has the right to earn a living and support a family, and that's the policies I'm going to pursue. I mean, a guy like that, making a kind of what we traditionally regard as a leftist political economic appeal, that guy would be huge. If Mark Wahlberg ran for president as a Democrat, like with that kind of something like that, with that kind of appeal, I mean, you'd really have something, I think. But they're not going to do it because they're so invested.
They're too bought.
They need to, but they won't.
No, well, you see them trying a little bit. I think they actually are trying because you do see this anti-billionaire thing, which kind of does. Start. Well, that tells me that there is a part of the Dems who are doing exactly what you're saying, which is really dead on that you're saying this, which is there's some strain of them that is saying, let's go in this direction. Let's shift back to economic leftism. Yeah. Let's try to get some rational thinking, in here. I mean, to me, the image that summed up how doomed the Dems are was they were trying to find a new DNC chair, and they were like, "Here's the candidates on stage." And they were like, okay, you start, Shantae. Yeah. And it was this like fat black woman, like sitting in a chair, like leaning all back. And she just started she just broke into song. She just broke into some like soulful song. And I was like, oh man, they're fucked. Like they are fucked.
Did you see where the guy came out and said there's not enough transgenders or something? Like they had a quota they had to. It was like, now we got 2 women and 3 men, but we need 1 transgender and 1 queering person. Or it was like this whole thing. It was like so bad.
And pretty it's like somebody has.
And they ended up with David Hogg.
Is that the chair of the DNC now?
No, he's not. He's not the chair. He had some like other important job though. Like he's up there. I forget his exact title. David Hogg is like a major figure now in the Democrat Party. Yeah, he's like 20.
He's like men.
Yeah.
Men for
elite human capital. Yeah.
Yeah. Men for the Dems. Yeah.
He could have been in that Kamala Harris commercial. I'm a man.
I'm a man for Dems.
I like women.
I love women too. Yeah, you had a great thing in one of your things where you showed a picture of Harry Sisson, and it was like everybody just laughed. Your students were just like laughing. Like, are you kidding me? That whole thing with him definitely was fake. They were trying to make him like cool for banging chicks. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the problem. If you literally cancel every white straight guy, as we're talking about, if you get rid of your autists, if you get rid of your white male autists, you're kind of fucked. It's like, because you just can't do it. You can't appeal anymore. You can't appeal to normal people. Unless it's just like, we're going to give you free money for being fat and brown, and it's like, well, that'll get you a lot, but you got to have some story to tell. And I think you're right that I think maybe they will try to do, but okay, so say they run Newsom, right? What's his platform? What does it has to be something. So does he try to do fuck the billionaires? I don't think.
Newsom,
maybe they let him do it. Maybe they let him do that.
Newsom, if you've been paying attention to him, he's been making the rounds of like right-wing media.
Yeah.
He was on, he has a podcast. He had Charlie Kirk on there. He
Yeah.
had Steve Bannon on there.
Which everybody's giving him shit for. I don't agree with that, but anyway, everybody's giving him shit for that.
He's smarter than people give him credit for. People think he's like this, hair gel, just face in Silicon Valley, but he's good. He's good at what he does. He survived that recall when he went out to a fancy restaurant during COVID and all this stuff like that. And he knows how to address it. He straight up, again, he knows how to sound authentic. He's like, yeah, I was totally wrong. You're right. I shouldn't have done that. That was a bad idea. He owns up to it. He doesn't try to play it off like the rest of them does. And he's trying to lay the groundwork for himself as, I think, like, I'm the good parts of Trumpism, but I'm more competent. I'm like the friendly version of him. I'm not really Patrick Bateman. Vote for me and you won't have any more mean tweets. You won't have any more of this. Trump's he'll say he won't roast Trump. He won't call him a Nazi. He won't do all these things. And he'll criticize other people from doing that. He'll say, I understand why people vote for Donald Trump. Donald Trump was a cry for Americans who want economic change. I sympathize with you. He won't be the enemy of Trump. He'll be the guy who's trying to be the inheritor of it.
But they need a platform, man. They tried this with Kamala and they had no platform and it failed. So I think that somebody in there is going to say you can't do it on fumes only. You can't just get in there and say Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump 7,000 times. Like there's got to be some. It didn't work. It didn't work.
So Donald Trump put in tariffs. There's going to be some good things. There's going to be some bad things. There's going to be some economic turmoil as a result of this. Newsom comes in and he says, okay, some of the changes Donald Trump made were good, but he went too far with these tariffs, right? I'm going to bring back, he's going to have a platform like sensible free trade, smart trade. I'm not calling it free trade. I'm calling it smart trade, right?
Smart trade.
Yeah, we'll bring in more cheap Chinese junk and stuff like that. So, you rubes can go to Walmart again. And, we'll do that. And then that, could get him enough. Where again, he's not jumping on Trump and criticizing Trump where he's popular, but he's saying, I'm gonna fix it. I'm gonna make it better. I'm gonna, stop the turmoil and all this. That's what I would predict. Something like that would happen. Now, will he be successful? I don't know.
Smart trade.
Yeah, smart. It's not free trade. It's
smart trade. Yeah. Gavin Newsom, 2028. Yeah. I could see it. And so they just continue to completely ignore every single grievance of Americans. They're just like, okay, right. It'll be like some really shallow thing where it's
he's not going to double down. He's going to address these grievances. He's going to say, I'm not woke. I'm not. I'm all about. Okay. Once Donald Trump again clears the way and gets rid of all these affirmative action policies and DEI policies and stuff like that, I'm not bringing those back. Right. That's the bad old days of the Democrat Party. I'm a sensible moderate. We're going to keep things like they are. All the upwardly mobile, progressive white guys are going to be able to go to Harvard again and do stuff. They're not going to have the quotas anymore. So I'm not going to mess with that. But where Donald Trump went off the rails,
and then the outer party really will have done its fucking job for them. This is why Rufo. Yep. If you're listening to this, I don't dislike you, but it really worries me. It's like look, Rufo has done amazing things. Hats off to him. I have nothing bad to say about the guy, but just make sure you're not just cleaning up just enough so that then Newsom gets in and it goes right back. But that's kind of the point you've been making. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Keep going.
You're good.
Yeah. What were you saying?
Oh no, you're saying you're right. I take like Rufo does good work. I like him for what he is. He's not fully on board with the program of the right.
The
whites. Yeah, the white right. Yeah. But
right.
He's taking bullets, and I'm not going to fault the man for that. He's out there accomplishing real things.
He's accomplishing real things. You can't hate on anybody.
Yeah.
You can't hate on anybody, and this is my rule. I never hate on anybody, or I hate on them, sure, but I never write off anybody who accomplishes things or creates actually good things, or actually things that are good. So. But it's going to be interesting. This is actually fascinating that we're kind of analyzing this. I could totally see this exactly Newsom rides the wave of the Trump administration fixing it just enough that he can come in and say, let's get back to what we were.
Yeah.
And Yeah, maybe that is what happens to the Dems. I don't know. Do you think they'll abandon trans?
Yes. I don't, or at least it'll get sidelined seriously.
Yeah.
That whole thing, woke and everything, it comes out of, I wrote it comes out of a moral panic in the media, essentially, where everybody's trying to signal their adherence to elite virtue, luxury beliefs to keep their jobs or to oust the guy above them so they can take his job. It was that kind of thing. None of them actually believe it. No one really thinks this guy in a wig and a dress is a woman. Nobody believes it. And they all secretly want it to go away. And if you doubt me on that, just look at the OkCupid stats and things like that. People who are progressive left, nobody dates anybody who's a man who says he's a woman. They'll say that trans women are women. They don't date them. Nobody treats them like women when they're alone and nobody's watching. They want it gone. Nobody likes affirmative action. Nobody likes this stuff. Nobody likes getting called, white colonizer, settler. Nobody likes that. They put up with it because they think the rest of them need them to put up with it. But that's, that's they don't. And if not, they won't do anything to get rid of it. But if Donald Trump gets rid of it, they're not going to bring it back. There's not going to be any impulse for that. If Gavin Newsom gets elected and trans people are banned from the military, he's not bringing them back. If they're banned from bathrooms, he's not. Why would he? He's not going to step on that third whale for 0.00001% of the population who's going to vote for him anyway. He's not going to do that. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. We're a little bit over time here. Anything coming up for you?
So let me announce, I don't want to give too many details, but over the past month or so, I've been working on a project with some other Substackers. And I'm not going to give a ton of details to it, but basically the idea is we're going to come up with a sort of Substack native publication that we're all going to participate in. And it's going to be kind of a group effort, and we're behind the scenes working on it right now. I expect it to debut sometime probably at the start of June. And so look forward to more news from that, anybody who's listening. Also, I got some people commenting over here on the side.
Wait, so say a little bit more about that. What is it? Okay.
Well, I don't want to give away too many details, but basically it's going to be kind of a group effort where it's a Substack native publication. So several authors are going to be participating in basically a collective post that's going to go out, maybe once a week, a monthly issue in 4 installments. Basically 5 writers per installment. That's kind of the plan we're going for now. Nice. And everybody gets to write about sort of their favorite theme, usually shorter posts than they would write on their regular stack. Some guys aren't even Substackers. They're just kind of coming from other spaces and stuff. And the idea is one problem that Substack that a lot of people have commented on is that you subscribe to this guy for $6, this guy for $6, this guy. And the idea I have with this is if we put a bunch of people in one place for slightly higher than $6, but way cheaper than they'd be individually, this will give people access to some of their favorite writers in one place and allow them to make a little money.
Okay. So like a little, I have to tell you the free press is worth $100 million, which
we're going to be close to that.
Substack native platform. And I'm sure that has nothing to do. I'm sure that's totally an accurate valuation of that publication. No, but hey, it's, say what you will, but good old Barry figured it out how to make $100 million Substack publication. So, sky's the limit.
JD Vance, if you're listening, feel free to kick in.
Yeah, get on this train. All right, cool, man. Well, that'll be exciting. I'll put you don't do Twitter at all, right?
I'm on Twitter. I don't have a huge following really, but I'm on X as Librarian of Celaeno, same like I am here. Same profile picture. So if you see me on there, just look up Librarian of Celaeno. I never
really see you on. Do I ever see you on here? Librarian.
I'm not huge. I don't. I think my
where the hell are you?
presence is kind of throttled by the fact that I put a lot of Substack links in my posts, and Elon Musk doesn't like that.
No, you shouldn't. It's literally pointless. You just don't even do it. It just screws you up. I think you're badly search banned also here. I don't see you at all.
Yeah, I'm on there.
I can't even find you. It's like you're not even coming up, like at all. I'm literally Googling it. It's Librarian of Celaeno.
Yes. The handle is at XEX Libris Celaeno, like from the Library of Celaeno.
At EX Libris.
LIBRIS.
Oh, here you are. Okay. Yeah. No, dude, I've literally never seen this account one time. Okay, I followed you. All right. Cool, man. Thanks so much. We'll talk soon.
Thank you for having me. And real quick, the comments, somebody asked me if I read Greek and Latin. I do read Greek. My Latin is not so great. Somebody said that they wish I do more podcasts. I hope so. Yeah, I really enjoyed this podcast very much. People have, what was it? There's like one. If I missed you, sorry. Look me up and I'll respond. But those are the two I noticed right off the bat. I wanted to make sure I told them what I could do. But
Cool.
Thank you very much for having me.
Of course, man. See you later.
I'll see you later.
Bye.